Hey everybody, this is Dr. Elaine again, and today's video is another in the series of things that changed my brain chemistry, and today's has to do with water safety. So let me tell you the story, and you'll understand again why I'm so passionate about life jackets on a boat and teaching children, even toddlers, swimming lessons and never leaving them out of your sight for a half of 1 second when you're near bodies of water. I feel so passionately about this, and so many organizations have tried to put a dent in the number of children that drown every year in the United States, and it's just really hard to change that number. It's incredible. It's so sad, and we keep trying. So education is really one of the main things we have, and fixing bodies of water so that children can't access them, like fences around pools and ladders that are put away so the child can't get into an above ground pool and things like that. Alarm systems over the surface of the pool water, all sorts of mechanisms are in place, and they're all good. We need those and more, and just a whole lot of attentiveness of children around bodies of water. So today's story is when I was already in attending, working in an outpatient pediatric clinic. And I happened to be on call that day. It was a weekday. And my family had come to the office at lunch and was sitting down eating lunch with me in the break room, which was a treat. And it felt very celebratory until my pager went off. Again, remember that I'm old and this happened a long time ago. And so that was before cell phones. And my pager beeped. I checked it and it said ER 911. Bad. So I called them back immediately and they said, get here instantly. And at that practice at that time, they were across the street. So I ran across the street. And understand, the ER really never called unless they had an admission. We did have at that time peds inpatient, not for extreme things. They would get shipped to UNC, but for just milder things, we could maybe admit for IV fluids, for rule out sepsis, feed and grow, for failure to thrive, various, not extremely complex things, because we didn't have a peds ICU or anything like that. So when the ER called me, the pediatrician on call, it seemed kind of a strange thing in an emergent sense, because certainly they had never needed me to assist them with any sort of resuscitation. They would easily, stabilize, package, and ship out any extremely sick child to a larger hospital. And so it was weird. It scared me. I ran across. Did I drive? I think I actually physically ran across the street because it seemed so urgent. Ran straight into the emergency department. And what was going on was horrible looking. And you guys may have never seen a code in action, but it's always bad. It's always tense, terrifying, and busy. Slightly chaotic, because even when it's done perfectly well, everybody has a different role and we need to communicate and have closed loop communication, and somebody has to be in charge, and somebody's doing the intervention, and somebody's trying to assess the history, and somebody's doing the physical exam and reassessing as we make interventions, and somebody's taking notes and scribing for all this, and there were people in place assigned, and what I came into were 2 separate codes. So even for an emergency department, that's pretty bad when they're simultaneous, and they were both on children, which is why I had been called, because there was only at that time, working that particular day, that particular year, in that particular hospital, there was 1 emergency department attending. So he needed me to run 1 code while he ran 1 code. And we were all up to date on PALS, Pediatric Advanced Life Support, and the nurses in the emergency department were phenomenal. So they already knew their roles and what to do and what to think of. They were certified in PALS as well. And we have a rule in in medicine altogether, that someone is not dead or able to be declared dead until they're warm and dead. Well, these 2 children who looked very pitiful, bedraggled, they had started taking their clothes off because we needed to warm them up and getting warming blankets on them. You could tell their hair was wet. They were muddy. The story was that when unsupervised, they had wandered out of the house. The younger sibling had fallen into a pond. The older sibling had jumped in to save the younger, and they both had drowned. So many times we want to just do absolute maximum resuscitation on children until we're certain that it's not making any difference. And that was the case in these 2 siblings. We did CPR. They were intubated. We were bagging through the ET tube. We were warming them, and it didn't work. So eventually, and that's part of why the emergency department had called me as well, the attending, because they needed one attending assigned to each child so that we could sign the death certificates. And I can't tell you when I've signed a death certificate. Other than that one case, I can't even remember, because most of the time the children are in the hospital. And when I was in a house staff, intern and resident, the attendings there would sign them. And then as an outpatient physician, that's just not something we do. And so that was one of the only times in my life I can remember signing a death certificate. And it was not a good feeling that these two siblings, in the matter of an hour, were both dead. It was horrible. So this was one of those cases. It was out in the country. They were inadequately supervised, and there was a pond on their property. So I cannot emphasize enough all the measures that it takes to prevent drowning. Know that in the United States, even now, it's the #1 cause of death in children 1 to 4. And I just hate it. And it was such a horrible, sickening feeling to leave the emergency department that day and go back to the office and see the afternoon patients. It was horrible. It was dark and gloomy and horrible. So I just want to explain again, you guys, why we feel so strongly about water safety. Because it matters, and because we've seen the nightmare of what can happen